Well, today we're going to talk about gross domestic product. GDP is the primary measure of the health of an overall macro economy. Now, there's a problem when we look at GDP, and you can see this problem by looking at the two graphs, one to my right and one to my left. These graphs both represent GDP in the United States over the last 30 years. And while the graphs look similar, they're not identical, which leads to the question, which one of these graphs should we be looking at? Now, the difference to the graphs are primarily based upon how you measure GDP in two different ways. In the first instance, you may look at GDP and measure it in what we refer to as constant prices. The other way of looking at GDP is to measure it in terms of what are called current prices. Now you may say to yourself, boy, that doesn't sound like a very big difference. But that difference is remarkably substantial when it comes to looking at gross domestic product. When we're measuring gross domestic product, we're trying to measure the value of the overall production in the economy. Now, basically what that means is we're taking the price of a good that you buy and multiplying it times the amount of that good that you buy. And we're doing that for every single good that you purchase. And we're doing that for every single person in the entire economy. And we're adding all of those numbers up. Now, that means that GDP could go up for one of two reasons. It means that if you buy more things, gross domestic product rises. It also means that if the price of the goods you buy go up, then GDP would go up as well. So basically what we're doing when we calculate GDP is taking price times quantity. And if either one of those two things change, then GDP can change. Unfortunately, if we look at a change in price only, then we might be mismeasuring the health of an economy. In fact, if you take a look at GDP by only focusing on changes in price, it's really easy to make GDP go up. Just raise the price of everything. But that's not reflecting a healthier economy. So what we would like to do, especially if we're going to compare things over time, because as we know, prices change over time, we'd like to remove the influence of that price change. The way we do that is by taking GDP for a particular year and making it real. In order to make something real, and the reason we make it real is because by looking at changes in output, that's what really matters. We try to hold the influence of price constant. Let's take a look at an example. Let's say we have a very small economy that only produces two goods, and we're just going to look at two different years, year one and year two. Let's say that the two goods they produce are jelly beans and asparagus. Now, in the first year, this economy produces 10 pounds of jelly beans and sells them for $1 a pound. And it produces 10 pounds of asparagus and sells it for $2 a pound. So if we take the price times the quantity for both of these goods, we end up with a GDP of $30 in the first year. Now let's say things change a little bit in year two. Let's say that the quantity that is produced for jelly beans goes up to 12 pounds and the price rises to $1.50. And then for asparagus, let's say once again that the economy produces 12 pounds, but in this case, the price is now $2.50. If we take $1.50 times 12 and add that to $2 times 12, we get a GDP of $48. If we're comparing this country over the two different years, then it looks obvious that year two is much better in terms of GDP than year one was. The number is much higher. But go back to the data, go back to that table, and look at that table, and you can see that GDP goes up for two reasons. the prices of both goods are rising and the quantities of both goods are increasing. What's really going on here? Well, to get a gauge as to what is really going on, we need to eliminate the impact of the price change. To do that, we're going to hold price constant. So we're going to pick a base year, either year 1 or year 2, it doesn't really matter. And we're going to use the prices in that base year to calculate our GDP. Let's just take the year 1 as our base year. In year 1, GDP we've already calculated is 30. In year 2, what we're going to do is we're going to use that price from year 1 for both the jelly beans and the asparagus. So now what we have is 12 pounds of jelly beans, but we're going to multiply it times $1, not 150. And we have 12 pounds of asparagus, and we're going to multiply that by $2, not 250. And in that case, if we take 12 times 1 and add it to 12 times 2, we get a real GDP of 36. Real GDP increases, just like nominal GDP did, but not by nearly as much. The reason we do this is in order to compare things over time, we want to reduce as much as possible the influence of price. Because if prices go up, those prices can alter the GDP, but that doesn't tell the story. A country's GDP can go up while their output falls, as long as prices go up faster than output goes down. So we want to eliminate the impact of price in order to get a real picture of what's happening to output in the economy.